family of shows. Available everywhere podcasts.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. And for our fourth segment of today's show, we looked at Texas. Now let us look at the Penn State Nittany Lions, the other loser in the CFP semifinals, what they have to do as well to ensure that 2025 is just as special as 2024. And most importantly, for a lot of fans of Penn State and pundits alike, it will come down to James Franklin. Much unlike Texas with Steve Sarkisian, who feel like they have a comfortable situation in terms of his ability to come up with game plans to beat the elite and the quarterback to do so in Arch Manning as well. James Franklin has been asked this question through his entire career. Can you beat the elite teams? And has failed almost every single time. He is now 1-18 against AP top 5 teams. And that formula, first and foremost, has to change before any structural change at Penn State. Because when I look at this Penn State roster and who they return and how they look under the Andy Kotelnicki regime, and how Drew Aller has improved, and how this defense improved as well. This has all the makings of a top 5 team yet again, a playoff team at that as well. But James Franklin has been the detriment of this team in big moments, and he simply can't be anymore. If you want to, not just compete in the Big Ten, but beat Ohio State, beat Oregon, beat Michigan, and ultimately contend for national championships, you're going to have to find ways to beat the elite teams. And they were close this year, closer than they've ever been before. But this time around, it was squarely on the shoulders of James Franklin against Ohio State, and then putting up a stellar offensive performance against Oregon with simply not being able to keep up with them. And then in the playoffs, I feel like Notre Dame just managed the game better than you. There has to be some way, if you're the coaching staff of Penn State, to mitigate for this. Because it simply cannot happen if Penn State wants to be called an elite college football program. But looking at them compared to Texas, they return a similar level of talent. And unlike Texas at the quarterback position, they actually have experience, and most importantly, improved experience at the quarterback position with Drew Aller. And then one of the best running back tandems in the league return. But then in terms of departures, while they're not as many as Texas, they're equally, if not more important to the outlook of this team. Because Tyler Warren is one of the most special players in college football. And him leaving means you have to replace his production at the wide receiver position, a traditionally weak position for Penn State. And Penn State, for the most part, can tend to drip into the transfer portal, but haven't necessarily built through it effectively over these past couple of years. And then on the defensive side of the football, Dani Dennis Sutton's future is up in the air, but Abdul Carter is almost certainly going to be a first-round NFL draft pick. So it's going to have to come down to potentially a narrative shift in how this defense plays, potentially looking at their secondary stepping up, much like they did in the CFP next season, but also as well, potentially another dip into the transfer market. But seeing as to how Penn State was given new life with this 12-team format and will be for as long as they're in the Big Ten and for as long as their only 2 losses, say, are to Ohio State and Oregon each year, they have the chance to become an elite program. But it's going to come down more than anything to actually beating Ohio State and Oregon, because it's all fine and dandy if you're just trying to get into the 12-team format. But it's completely wrong if you want to win a national championship. And so I feel like Penn State are a weird team to analyze and dissect heading into next season because they return a lot of talent offensively, right? You return Drew Aller, who had massive strides this year in his second season in the Andy Kotelnicki era. And then you return Nicholas Singleton and Cajun Allen, who were a big part of why you advanced as far as you did in the CFP. But when I look at this receiving core, nothing truly inspires me. When I look at players in the defense, outside of, say, the secondary, outside of the pass rush now, Sans Carter and potentially Dennis Sutton, it doesn't inspire me. And so I do think that Penn State's ultimate issue is how they approach the offseason. Because if you're a team like Texas, you become a destination spot, even though the SEC in many ways has lost a little bit of its luster in terms of recruitment and also in terms of being a marquee transfer destination. But in the Big Ten, it's now becoming a little bit more difficult because of all the teams in the Pac-12 entering the mix, and because of the fact that Ohio State has asserted its dominance. And while, a lot of these northern Big Ten schools do tend to recruit well, I can't necessarily say the same of Penn State. And I don't know why, but it's going to have to be compensated for by an ambitious approach in the offseason. If you fail to sign players who you feel could be immediate impacts for your team, you're going to have to start getting ambitious in the transfer market. And so, if I'm looking at the CFP picture and all the teams who are the elites outside of, say, the group of 5 teams, I'm looking at Ohio State, I'm looking at Texas, I'm looking at Oregon, I'm looking at potentially even a team like Tennessee, I'm looking at the Georgias of the world. These are big recruiting schools who are not going to go away, who are going to consistently in the future get top 5, top 10 recruiting classes. If you're Penn State, that's what you're contending with. And so, while this year was a good platform for this program to build itself up, to give itself a reputation, you're going to also have to consistently beat the elite teams and prove that you can develop talent. This was a good start, but now this is really a season where different names, different stories had to be written. And so, if I'm Penn State, I'm going to have to start thinking about becoming a big player in the transfer portal. So, I don't necessarily know if, say, any of their recruited players or any players that they do get in the transfer portal will immediately help them, but it's an effort, right, to put a better product out into the field. Because, yes, what we saw out of Penn State this season was promising offensively, but then again, Tyler Warren was just that good of a player. And yes, while Nicholas Singleton and Cajun Allen were also a big part of what got you to the CFP, Drew Aller needs help. And it was pretty stark on that final drive. And so, I do feel like right now, they have the blueprint, right? They have a foundation where players can come to and say, we can compete for a CFP championship. But it's going to come down to ultimately James Franklin and how he approaches this new era in Penn State football history, and B, how this team now approaches modern aspects of the game. Because a lot of these up-and-coming teams aren't going to play dead for you. You are going to have to take initiative. You are going to have to ultimately find ways to compensate for losses. You right now hold your own destiny in your hands if you're Penn State. And it's a good place to be, but it's also daunting because never in their existence could they have imagined that now they were given a place at the table in the playoff field. Now that's true for a lot of these teams as well, though. So right now, Penn State, congratulations to you. It's going to be tougher the second time around because you're not going to have a do-everything security blanket in Tyler Ward anymore, and your defense is not going to have perhaps one of its best players this entire history anymore. And also, all these other teams are already planning ahead as well. So you're going to have to be battling a lot of blue blood programs to get to the top. It can happen, and it almost happened this year. You were one field goal away, but now this is what the future and impact of being a playoff team does to you. You have to think fast before others do as well. So if you're Penn State, you're going to have to continue building and building and building to finally break through. But let me know what you think about this team in the comments below, because coming up next for our final segment, we'll be transitioning to the world of the NBA. Another huge Western Conference showdown takes place tonight. It's Wolves-Grizzlies, when we get back after this short break.